For over a decade, I carefully treated a girl like she was the only light in my world. She, however, dove headfirst into the gutter, falling for a thug who only knew how to greet her with his fists. I exhausted myself pulling her out, only to earn her deepest, most bitter hatred. She used me to climb to the pinnacle of her career, all while waiting for her true love to get out of prison. Then, she kicked me to the curb and told me to go die. When I opened my eyes again, I was back in a year. She ran to him without a second thought. Oh, this is going to be brilliant. Vince gets out of county today. Go pick him up. Take the black Maybach. He likes that one. And book the best private room at Empire Lounge to welcome him back. The words were a command, delivered without the courtesy of a simple please. It was as if I wasn't her partner of over 10 years, the man who helped her turn a small, failing workshop into a publicly traded corporation. It was as if I was the dog she could order around at will. Vince. The name dredged up some long-buried memories. Images flashed through my mind against my will. The high school girl in a white dress, her smile as clean and bright as a summer daisy. That was Chloe. Then, the Chloe who, for Vince, started smoking, burned cigarette scars on her arm, skipped class, got into fights, and even got pregnant. And finally, 7 years ago, in a police station, her eyes burning with hatred as she stared at me, screaming, "It was you. You did this to him. If you hadn't called the cops, he never would have gone to jail. I hate you. Ethan, I hate you." She hated me. She hated me because after Vince had beaten her black and blue, dragged her to a back alley clinic for an abortion that nearly killed her from blood loss, I risked her wrath and called the police. She hated that I got the law involved, which uncovered Vince's extensive rap sheet: robbery, assault, and even dirtier dealings. With his priors, the judge threw the book at him. 7 years. I had saved her life, and in doing so, became her greatest enemy. After she recovered, it was like she became a different person, suddenly dependent on me, as if our bitter history never existed. She needed my money, my skills, my connections to fill the void left by a life and education she'd thrown away for Vince, and to fuel her new, soaring ambition. Like a fool, I thought time would heal the wounds. I thought eventually she'd see what I had done for her. I practically bled for her, co-founding the company, working through the night, drinking until my stomach lining gave out just to land a key client, and calling in every favor I had a clearer path. Finally, the company went public. Its market cap was staggering, and now I understood. My entire purpose was to build a magnificent stage for her, just so she could welcome her prince back from his prison sentence. And me, the old dog who had served his purpose, it was time for me to get lost, preferably by dropping dead so I wouldn't get in the way of their reunion. An overwhelming sense of exhaustion and absurdity washed over me. I picked up my phone and typed a reply. "Go fuck yourself, you absolute moron." One sentence, clean and simple. Then I buzzed my secretary on the intercom. "Cancel all my meetings and appointments for this afternoon." I stood up and walked to the massive floor-to-ceiling window, looking down at the bustling city below. The traffic flowed like blood through concrete veins, the people like ants. I once thought that if I just worked hard enough, I could build her a sanctuary in this steel forest, a nest safe from any storm. How utterly pathetic. Later, I received an apologetic call from Chloe. She invited me over to her place for dinner. I went, and I think I died. In my last moments of fading consciousness, I saw Chloe on Vince's arm, standing at the door of my office. The disgust and triumph on her face were unmistakable. "Vince, are the stock transfer papers signed? Once they are, you could get rid of him." And Vince, the man I had personally sent to prison, had his arm wrapped around her waist, a cruel, mocking smile on his face as he looked at me. My heart seized, and everything went black. A chaotic room, blaring music, a foul stench. Where the hell am I? I coughed violently and forced my eyes open. Before me were blurry figures and a table cluttered with empty beer bottles and fruit trays. A few kids, some in school jackets, others dressed like wannabe street toughs, were laughing and shouting, playing some drinking game with dice. I froze, instinctively looking down at myself. A blue and white high school track jacket, slender wrists, and a cheap, foam-top beer in my hand. This is... My head snapped up, my eyes scanning the loud, crowded booth until they locked on a figure in the corner. "Chloe, that goddamn..." ungrateful viper. A younger Chloe, her face still holding a trace of teenage innocence. She was wearing a modified, shortened school skirt, her face caked with makeup far too heavy for her age. But her eyes were electric, and she was nestled against a guy with bleach blonde hair and a black, studded leather jacket. That guy was Vince Ryder. He had one arm around Chloe, a cigarette dangling from his other hand. As he exhaled a cloud of smoke, he leaned down and whispered something that made her giggle. She tilted her head back and kissed his chin. The scene burned itself into my brain. I was back 10 years in the past, in the spring of my senior year of high school. I was back at the very beginning, when Chloe had just met Vince and was becoming captivated by his so-called bad boy charm and rebellious spirit, the first step on her path to ruin. It was also the beginning of my life as her devoted, decade-long simp. After the initial shock, a cold, unprecedented clarity washed over me, extinguishing the last embers of the idealized first love I had held onto for so long. The old Ethan, the one from this timeline, should be watching this scene in agony right now, torn between wanting to intervene and being terrified of making Chloe mad. And in the days to come, he would watch her sink deeper, reach out to save her time and again, only to be pushed away by both her and Vince, earning nothing but her undying hatred for his efforts. My stomach churned, whether from the cheap beer or the pathetic, laughable memories, I couldn't tell. Ethan, what are you spacing out for? Drink up. A guy with a shock of green hair, one of Vince's lackeys, shoved a freshly opened beer into my hand. Damn, dude, quit being such a pussy. Before, I would have forced it down. I would have done it just to stay in Chloe's orbit, to feel like I was part of her world, even if it meant puking my guts out later. But now, screw that. I looked at him, a slow smile spreading across my face, and took the bottle. Just as everyone expected me to chug it, I flipped my wrist and brought the bottle down squarely on his head. Glass shattered. Amber liquid and white foam erupted everywhere. The noisy booth fell silent in an instant. Every eye was locked on me, wide with shock. Even Chloe, who had been laughing with Vince, turned to look, her heavily penciled eyebrows knitted in annoyance and disapproval, her expression screaming. Ethan, are you trying to ruin my night again? Vince narrowed his eyes, pulling Chloe tighter as he shot me a look dripping with menace. I set the broken bottleneck down on the table with a sharp clink. Ignoring the stunned, angry, and confused stares from everyone, I looked directly at Chloe, my voice perfectly calm. Chloe, you want to be with him? She was taken aback, clearly not expecting me to be so direct. Then, like a proud, foolish peacock, she lifted her chin. Yeah, I do. Ethan, Vince isn't like you bookworms thought he's a real man. Stay out of my business. Okay. I nodded, a genuine smile of relief touching my lips. I hope you get everything you wish for. Without another glance at any of them, I turned, pushed my way through the stunned crowd in the booth, and walked toward the exit. No one dared to stop me. At the end of the day, they were just a bunch of teenage wannabes. Behind me, I heard Chloe's indignant voice. Ethan, what's that supposed to mean? Get back here. And Vince's dismissive sneer. Forget him. He's a loser. Come on, babe. Let's have another drink. I turned my head, my gaze sharp and hard. What did you just call me? Silence. Stepping out of the bar, the cool, early summer night air hit my face, washing away the nauseating smell of smoke and stale beer. I took a deep breath of fresh air and looked up at the night sky, at the few scattered stars. Perfect. This time, Chloe, you can go chase your great, tragic love story. I'm done playing. When I got back to the house, a place that felt both dated and comforting in my memory, my mom was still up, knitting in the living room, a glass of warm milk waiting for me on the coffee table. Seeing me, she stood up, her face etched with worry. Ethan, you're back. Where's Chloe? Isn't she with you? In my past life, I constantly lied to my mom to cover for Chloe's late nights. I looked at my mother's still youthful face, a pang of sadness in my chest. I walked over and gave her a gentle hug. Mom, that's over now. Chloe's made her own choices. From now on, we're just going to worry about us. My mom was startled, clearly confused by my sudden change, but she simply patted my back gently. Okay, sweetie, as long as you understand. Now drink your milk and get to bed. You have school tomorrow, and you're a senior. Your studies are important, but don't put too much pressure on yourself. That night, I slept more soundly than I had in years. There was no more worrying about Chloe, no more agonizing over how to pull her back onto the right path. The immense clarity that came with this second chance gave me a singular focus. I had everything I needed now. The next day at school, as expected, rumors were already spreading about my antisocial behavior at the bar and how Chloe and Vince were more in love than ever. During the break between classes, Chloe came to find me, her face a mask of annoyed superiority, as if I had personally offended her. "Ethan, what was your problem last night? Who were you trying to impress by storming off like that?" she demanded, as if my leaving was the ultimate act of disrespect. Nearby, students pricked up their ears. I closed my textbook and looked at her calmly. "It wasn't a problem. It just seemed like you guys were having fun, and I fell out of place, so I left." My calm demeanor seemed to infuriate her. She clearly would have preferred to see me hurt, begging, or trying to talk her out of her choices. "You were looking down on Vince," she said, her voice rising. "I'm telling you, Ethan, Vince is 10 times the man you'll ever be. He's not some nerd who just hides in books. You need to stay out of my life." I nodded. "Okay, I get it. Is there anything else? I need to study." My complete lack of engagement was like a punch landing on a pillow. Her face flushed with anger, and she finally stomped her foot. "You're being impossible." She spun around and ran off, probably to find her real man for comfort. After school, I didn't trail her like a detective anymore, terrified she'd get into trouble with Vince. Instead, I went straight to the public library, found a quiet corner, and began reviewing my high school coursework and planning for the future. Knowledge and skills, that was real power. Love, especially the kind of love Chloe craved, filled with violence and self-destruction. It was nothing more than a cheap, theatrical prelude to ruin. The days passed. I focused on my studies, started working out, and reconnected with old friends I had drifted away from because of Chloe. My life became full and peaceful. There's a saying, isn't there? Once you've faced death, even studying can feel like a luxury. As for Chloe, she completely went off the rails. She started skipping school more frequently. The makeup got heavier, and you could often smell the lingering scent of smoke and booze on her from feet away. The teachers tried talking to her a few times, but it was useless. She just talked back. She started hanging out exclusively with the deadbeats from town, calling herself Vince's girl, and acting like this was the rebellious, romantic life every teenager dreamed of. Whenever we passed each other in the halls, she'd give me a look that was a mixture of disgust and pride, as if to say, "See, I'm so much happier now that you're not nagging me." I always met her gaze with indifference, looking at her as if she were a complete stranger. That dismissal, I learned, bothered her more than any lecture ever could. She seemed completely unable to cope with a world where I wasn't revolving around her. Finally, one Friday afternoon, she cornered me at the school gate. Vince and his crew were leaning against their motorcycles a short distance away, cigarettes hanging from their lips, watching us with smirks on their faces. Chloe didn't look good. Her eyes were red, like she'd been crying, and there was a faint bruise on her arm. "Ethan," she called out, her tone still sharp but now tinged with an undercurrent of desperation and entitlement. "My phone's out of credit. Give me some money." In my past life, I would have given her my last dollar, money I'd saved from my allowance or earned from secret part-time jobs. Was I under some kind of spell back then? What an idiot. That wasn't happening anymore. I looked at her, my voice full of mock surprise. "Why would I give you money? Don't you have parents?" My question caught her off guard. A flicker of embarrassment and anger crossed her face. We're supposed to be friends, aren't we? I need it right now." "Friends?" I let out a small laugh. Do friends ignore warnings and jump headfirst into a dumpster fire, then blame the person who tried to stop them? "Chloe, we stopped being friends a long time ago. For expenses, you should ask your real man, not me." My words were a slap in the face. Her cheeks went pale, especially since Vince was watching from nearby. "You're an ass, Ethan," she shrieked. "If you don't want to help, just say so. Why do you have to be so condescending? Vince, he's just a little short on cash right now." Oh, I nodded. "So, a real man is someone who lets his girlfriend go broke, and then has her beg other guys for money." My voice wasn't loud, but it was clear enough for Vince and his friends to hear. Vince's face darkened instantly. He threw his cigarette on the ground and strode over. "The hell did you just say, pretty boy?" he he snarled, shoving Chloe behind him and getting in my face, puffing out his chest in a classic street punk intimidation tactic. The old Ethan, the skinny bookworm, might have been scared, but I've seen worse. I knew exactly how fragile this kind of bravado was. Besides, I've been working out. I wasn't that skinny kid anymore. I met his gaze without flinching, my tone laced with mockery. I said, "What kind of man can't even support his own girlfriend and makes her grovel for cash from someone else? Is that your idea of manhood, Vince?" Vince's face turned a shade of purple. A crowd of students leaving school was starting to form. For a guy like him, his reputation, his cred, was everything. "You son of a bitch," he roared, swinging a fist at my head. In my past life, he'd beaten me for trying to stop him from taking Chloe somewhere. Back then, Chloe had always held me back when I tried to fight. But this wasn't my past life. I sidestepped the punch and subtly kicked his leg out from under him. Thrown off balance by his own momentum, he stumbled forward, nearly face-planting on the asphalt. A few muffled snickers came from the crowd. Humiliated, he scrambled to his feet and lunged at me again. "Vince, don't!" Chloe suddenly screamed, grabbing his arm. "We're in front of the school. Security will be here any second." She was pretending to hold him back, but her eyes were glaring daggers at me, as if this were all my fault. Vince was heaving, his chest rising and falling. He pointed a finger at my nose. "You're dead. Miller, I'm going to kill you." I calmly straightened the collar of my jacket. "Anytime," I said with a faint smile. "Just a friendly reminder, though, assault gets you detention, maybe even juvie. You're not quite 18 yet, are you? Ever wonder what that tastes like?" My words hit their mark. Guys like him, they're bullies who prey on the weak. They're terrified of actual consequences, of the real law. All the so-called tough guys in high school are like that. They'll push you around as long as you stay quiet. The moment you involve parents, teachers, or the cops, you realize they're nothing. Sure enough, a flicker of fear crossed his eyes. He spat a few more curses, his threats now ringing hollow, before letting Chloe and his friends pull him away. As Vince dragged her off, Chloe looked back at me one last time, her eyes filled with a venomous hatred, as if I were the villain who had ruined her perfect romance. I just turned and walked in the opposite direction, my shadow stretching long in the afternoon sun. I knew this was just the beginning. A vengeful punk like Vince wouldn't let this go, and Chloe, on the path she had chosen, would only sink deeper. All I had to do was watch. Vince didn't let it go. A few days later, after evening study hall, I deliberately took a shortcut down a deserted side street. Sure enough, he and his crew were waiting in the alley, armed with baseball bats. "All right, Miller. You're not walking away from this one," Vince sneered. I quickly counted them. 4. Tricky but manageable. I discreetly pressed the new panic button app I'd installed on my phone, which silently dialed 911 and sent my location. "This is all you've got, Vince?" I taunted him, buying time. "Have to call your buddies to fight your battles? Real manly." "Shut your mouth," he roared, charging at me first. This time, I didn't dodge completely. I took a calculated hit to my forearm from one of his friends, a sharp, searing pain, but it gave me the opening I needed. I drove my foot hard into Vince's stomach, sending him sprawling to the ground. The fight was on. I protected my head and focused all my energy on Vince, landing as many blows as I could while taking hits from the others. The bats hurt, but my mind was calm. Distant sirens grew closer right on cue. I immediately stopped fighting and curled up, playing the role of the innocent student ambushed by thugs. Their faces went pale. They tried to run, but the cops were already at the end of the alley, blocking their escape. We were all taken to the station. During my statement, I was crystal clear. "Officer, I don't know them. They just jumped me, tried to rob me, and started beating me. I was just defending myself." I showed them the dark, swelling bruise on my forearm. "I like to press charges." "That's bullshit. It was personal," Vince yelled from across the room. "Personal?" I looked at him, my eyes cold as ice. "What personal history do we have? Is this because your girlfriend asked me for money at school the other day and I said no? Is that your reason for felony assault and robbery?" The logic was sound. The motive was clear. Between my status as an honor student, my visible injuries, and the bats they were carrying, it was obvious who the police were going to believe. Because he had organized an assault with intent to rob, and with his existing juvenile record, Vince was detained. He might not get a long sentence because of his age, but it was enough to make his life hell for a while. When Chloe arrived at the station, her eyes were red and swollen from crying. The moment she saw me, she flew into a rage, lunging at me like a wild animal. "Ethan, you again, you're a curse. Why do you always have to ruin Vince's life?" An officer stepped between us. I watched her melt down with detached calm. "Look closely, Chloe. He and his friends ambushed me with bats. I'm the victim. A passerby called the cops, not me. Is this what you want? Your real man is a violent mugger." "You're lying. Vince isn't like that. You must have provoked him," she shrieked, completely deaf to reason. I didn't bother arguing. After finishing my statement, I walked out of the police station under the sympathetic gaze of the officers. The dull throb in my arm was a sharp reminder of how much clearer things were now. After this, Chloe and Vince would hate me more than ever. But what did that have to do with me? Vince was held in juvenile detention for 15 days. For those 15 days, Chloe was like a ghost. She skipped school to wander around the detention center, then went begging Vince's friends for help, only to be laughed at, hit on, and groped. She sent me a few texts. They started as curses, then devolved into tearful pleas, and finally, a hint of desperation. "Ethan, nobody will help me. Do you think Vince is getting beat up in there? I need money to bribe someone." I almost laughed at that last one. Bribe someone? For a teenage punk in juvie? Lady, you've been watching too many movies. I read them, deleted the thread, and blocked her number. I didn't reply once. 15 days later, Vince got out. Chloe treated it like a great victory, and her devotion to him became absolute. In her mind, a love that endured hardship was the only true love. She spent what little money she had on a party to welcome him home, celebrating his return from his ordeal. As for Vince, the incident seemed to confirm his paranoid belief that I was obsessed with Chloe and was trying to sabotage him out of jealousy. This delusion made him even more possessive and controlling. He forbade her from talking to any other guys, not that I had any intention of speaking to her. The slightest thing would set him off, and he'd resort to shouting or hitting. And Chloe? She twisted this abuse in her mind, convincing herself it was proof that he cared about her. She started coming to school with new bruises, a slap mark on her cheek one day, finger-shaped bruises on her arm the next. Students whispered behind her back, their looks a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. But she held her head high, defiant, as if to say, "You just don't understand our love." Once, I overheard her showing off a cigarette burn on her arm to a group of girls. "Look," she said, almost bragging. "Vince gave this to me. He said it's so, I'll always be his." The other girls were horrified into silence. When I heard about it, my stomach turned. It was pathological. She was a lost cause. Things finally came to a head just before final exams. Chloe and Vince were hanging out at a pool hall when Vince got into an argument with another crew. A brawl broke out. In the chaos, Chloe was shoved hard against the corner of a pool table. She collapsed, bleeding and curled in agony on the floor. Vince saw her fall, but instead of helping, his first thought was of his pride. He fought even more furiously. The fight didn't stop until the owner called the cops. Chloe was rushed to the hospital. She had been pregnant, an ectopic pregnancy. The impact had caused a rupture, and she was bleeding internally. The baby was gone, and she almost died on the operating table. When the news hit school, it was a scandal. Her parents rushed to the hospital, nearly collapsing when they saw their daughter's ghostly pale face. This time, there was no one left to cover for her, no one to clean up her messes. I didn't hear about any of this until after graduation. I heard the damage to her uterus was so severe that she would likely never be able to have children. By then, I was holding my acceptance letter to Stanford, ready to start new life. After a moment's hesitation, I decided to go to the hospital, not out of concern, but for a final clean break. The hospital room smelled strongly of antiseptic. Chloe was lying in bed, so thin she was almost skeletal. She was staring blankly at the ceiling, her face scrubbed clean of makeup, leaving only a pale, exhausted canvas. When I walked in, her eyes shifted, slowly focusing on me. There was no hysterical outburst, just a dead, hollow numbness. "You came," she said, her voice raspy. "Yeah," I replied, placing a basket of fruit on the bedside table. "Heard you were in trouble." Silence stretched between us. "The baby's gone," she said suddenly, her voice flat. "The doctor said I might never be able to have kids." "Oh," I said. "Well, that's just terrific." More silence. "Okay, maybe that wasn't funny. Where's Vince?" I asked. Her body gave a nearly imperceptible shudder. A flicker of real fear and pain finally entered her eyes. "They arrested him. It's serious this time. One of the other guys was badly hurt, and they're looking into him for other things." I nodded. It was inevitable. A guy like him was always going to self-destruct. "Ethan." She turned her head, her vacant eyes slowly filling with tears. The regret and despair were overwhelming. It hurts so much. I regret everything. I should have listened to you. Can you? Her voice broke into a sob. She stretched out a thin, trembling hand, as if trying to grasp onto something. "Can you help me? Like you used to?" Looking at her pathetic state, hearing her long-overdue confession, I felt nothing. Not a single ripple of pity. In fact, I almost wanted to laugh. The old Ethan would have been heartbroken. He would have rushed to her side, held her, and told her, "Don't be afraid. I'm here." But that Ethan was long gone. I took a step back, out of her reach. I saw the shock on her face, the disbelief in her eyes as her hand hung in the air. I began to speak, my voice as calm as if I were discussing the weather. "Chloe, you chose this path. You're a real man. You're a rebellious youth. Your great love story. This is the price. You have to pay it yourself. I can't help you." With that, I turned my back on her pale, crumbling face and walked out of the room without a second glance. Behind me, I could hear the sound of her suppressed, gut-wrenching sobs. So satisfying. The sound was quickly cut off as the door swung shut, sealing her away from my world for good. College was a different universe, one that almost made me forget Chloe Evans and the toxic waste of my high school years. I devoured knowledge, joining every club and research project I could. Stanford was filled with brilliant minds, and debating with them, building with them, gave my past life's business experience a solid new foundation. I made new friends, real friends, people who share my drive. We launched a few small startups, stumbled a lot, but were fueled by pure passion. Occasionally, I'd hear bits and pieces about Chloe from friends back home. She took a year off after the hospital. Her body and her reputation were wrecked. Her parents had drained their savings to pay her medical bills and looked like they'd aged a decade overnight. Vince, having turned 18 just before the pool hall brawl, was tried as an adult. With his priors, the judge gave him a heavy sentence. 7 years was the minimum. She had apparently tried to get help from his old crew, but they either hit on her or told her to get lost. The gritty, romanticized street life she'd once admired had shown its ugly, predatory face the moment she was no longer of any use. She became a cautionary tale that parents in town told their kids. I heard she eventually went back to finish her degree at a community college, but her grades were terrible. After that, the news about her dried up completely. The white moonlight of my youth had faded into nothing, lost in the mundane darkness of the world she had chosen. I felt no pity, only a sense of cosmic balance. She got what she deserved. In 4 years, my team and I caught the first wave of a new internet boom. A killer project landed us an angel investor. After graduation, instead of taking cushy jobs at Google or Apple like most of our classmates, we poured everything into our company. It grew explosively. Within a few years, after several rounds of funding, we were the unicorn of our industry. During that time, I met women I was interested in, but the scars from my first life made me cautious, distrustful. Most of my energy went into my work. On my 30th birthday, our company went public on the NASDAQ. As the founder and CEO, my net worth skyrocketed. I was on the cover of magazines, the new golden boy of tech. Standing in the spotlight, watching the cheering employees and investors below, I felt a deep sense of accomplishment. This life, the one I had built with my own hands, was a world away from my last. Without Chloe, without the parasitic drama and emotional drain, this was the life I was always meant to have. But fate, it seems, has a twisted sense of humor. At a major industry gala, I was in the middle of a conversation with some key investors when I caught a familiar figure out of the corner of my eye. She was holding a wine glass, tentatively trying to navigate the crowd to get to me. It was Chloe. She had changed. A lot. She was wearing a cheap-looking pantsuit, and her makeup, though carefully applied, couldn't hide the exhaustion etched into her features. The defiant spark in her eyes was gone, replaced by a calculating, almost pleading look. Life had not been kind to her. She was working for some small PR firm and had likely pulled every string she had just to get into the event, hoping to network. She saw me, and her expression became a chaotic mess of shock, disbelief, regret, and a desperate sort of longing. I immediately turned my gaze back to my conversation, acting as if I hadn't seen her, but she was persistent. The moment the investors moved on, she rushed over, her voice trembling. "Ethan, is that really you?" I had no choice but to stop. I looked at her with a cool, professional distance. "Hello. I'm sorry, have we met?" My feigned ignorance was like a bucket of ice water. Her face went white. She forced a smile. "It's me, Chloe Evans. We went to high school together." "Ah, Ms. Evans." I nodded, my tone as polite and impersonal as if I were speaking to a cold caller. "Can I help you with something?" I can't believe how successful you are," she stammered, her eyes greedily taking in my expensive suit and watch. "Congratulations." "Thank you," I said, glancing at my watch. "If you'll excuse me, I have other guests to attend to." As I started to walk away, she panicked and reached for my arm. "Ethan, wait." I moved just out of her reach, my brow furrowing in annoyance. Her hand hung awkwardly in the air. Her face was a mask of embarrassment and desperation. "Ethan, I know I was wrong back then. I was young and stupid, and I hurt you. I'm so sorry. Please, for old time's sake." "Ms. Evans," I cut her off, my voice dropping. "There are no old times between us. There is only the memory of a rather unpleasant acquaintance. Please have some self-respect." My words were like a physical blow. Her eyes immediately welled with tears. "How can you say that? We were once." "Once what?" I took a step closer, my gaze sharp, my voice low enough that only she could hear. "Once you threw yourself away for a violent piece of trash and treated me like your personal doormat? Or was it the time you told me to go die after I was the one who saved you from bleeding out in a hospital bed?" All the color drained from her face. Her lips trembled, but no words came out. "Chloe." I stepped back, regaining my composure, but my voice was glacial. "Your youth, your choices, and your consequences have nothing to do with me. We settled our accounts a long time ago. Don't ever show up in front of me again. Don't even think about looking me up, because if you do," I added, my voice a quiet threat, "I have no problem showing you and your true love, who I hear is getting out soon, what real trouble looks like." At the mention of Vince, she flinched, a deep, primal fear flashing in her eyes. I didn't wait for a response. I turned and walked away, back toward my partners and my bright, shining future, leaving her standing there, broken and alone. I knew that last threat had shattered any lingering fantasy she might have had. She finally understood. The Ethan who would have done anything for her, who had worshipped the ground she walked on, had died in the doorway of a filthy dive bar 10 years ago. The man standing before her now was from a different world. And in that world, there wasn't an ounce of warmth left for her. A few more years passed. My business empire expanded, with investments in multiple sectors, making me a veritable titan of industry. My life was full and orderly. My parents sometimes pushed me to go on dates, but I remained wary of marriage. Then, by chance, I heard some news from a college friend who now worked in the legal system. Vince Ryder had been released on parole. Predictably, he couldn't hold down a real job. Old habits die hard, and he soon fell in with his old crowd, running low-level scams and strong-arming local businesses. And Chloe, I heard, had drifted between dead-end jobs after community college. Getting older, with no real career prospects and a tarnished reputation, she was barely scraping by. Somehow, she and the newly released Vince had found their way back to each other. As for how Vince found Chloe, well, that had nothing to do with me. Just a coincidence. My friend's voice was laced with a kind of weary pity. I hear the guy, Vince, beats her regularly, forces her to work to support him, then takes all her money. She's apparently tried calling the cops a few times, but he always threatens her into dropping the charges. It's a sad situation. I listened, swirling the coffee in my mug, my expression unchanging. Sad, maybe, but more than that, It was pathetic, and it was earned. She had chosen the abyss, and every time a hand reached down to help her, she had slapped it away, choosing to sink deeper. What can anyone do? Want me to keep an eye on it? My friend asked tentatively. He knew the broad strokes of my history with Chloe, but not the details. No, I said, putting my mug down. Their lives have nothing to do with me. You don't need to pass along any more information about them. Got it, he said, taking the hint. About 6 months later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. My gut told me who it was. I answered but said nothing. On the other end, I could hear Chloe's ragged, desperate sobs. Ethan, please, you have to help me. Vince is a monster. He's going to kill me. He took all my money, and now he's trying to make me. Please, I'm begging you. Her pleas were horrifying. In another life, they would have sent me running to her rescue without a second thought. But now I felt nothing. I almost wanted to laugh. I waited for her sobs to subside before I spoke, my voice devoid of any warmth. Chloe, you must have dialed the wrong number. You're looking for 911. The crying stopped abruptly, as if she was stunned by my coldness. Ethan, how could you alternatively? I interrupted, a note of cruel mockery in my tone. You could call up your old crew. Aren't they the ones who are so big on loyalty? Dead silence on the other end, punctuated only by her shaky breathing. Chloe, I said, enunciating each word with chilling clarity, we were done a long time ago. The moment you chose Vince, the moment you looked at me with pure hatred in your eyes, we became strangers. Whether you live or die, your pain, your suffering, you brought it all on yourself. Why in the world would I save you? So take your tears and your apologies and shove them. They're worthless to me. Don't call me again. If you do, I'll file a harassment complaint. I mean it, and Vince will be hearing from someone. Without waiting for a reply, I hung up. Then I blocked the number for good. The world was quiet again. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. Outside, the city pulsed with life, a river of light and motion. My world was vast and full of purpose, with a limitless future waiting for me. As for Chloe and Vince, they were destined to rot in whatever dark, filthy corner they had crawled into, tearing each other apart until there was nothing left. That was the true and only destination for their great love story, and it had absolutely nothing to do with me. The end.